Okay, you can see my screen, right? Okay, thank you very much. As I said, I'm not an expert in housing economics and finance, but I think it's we can learn together. So this lecture, lecture 2, we will go over some basic ideas, concepts of housing finance. What is housing finance? I know our MAHUM students you have a very diverse background, and some of you even might have the finance subject in your undergraduate studies. So it might be easier for you, but for other students with a design background or public policy, they may need some more knowledge on this topic. So we will basically focus on these issues. So let's discuss the first issue. So what is housing finance? Actually, I think the main purpose of housing finance, as we know, maybe you are familiar with, is that we provide the funds so that home buyers need to purchase their homes, right? So when you want to buy a flat in your city, you might need some finance help. So you may get the mortgage from the private bank or public sector, and housing finance is connected with the system of money. So we discuss the money issue and credit, which operates to enable all types of residential property to be built, improved, bought, rented, maintained, and repaired. So it's not just for buying house. We will also use to for individual buyers. So it's an issue of housing purchase. But for developers, they need to build housing projects, and also for the government, they may need to build the public housing estates. So they also need to raise some funds, right? So it is a money issue. So it refers to the money that allows for production and consumption of housing. So production of housing, build and maintain housing stock. So the developers and both in the private sector and the public sector, right? And consumption for housing, so to pay rent, mortgage, and repayment, and so this is housing finance. So and now let's see a very short video. Let me see how to stop share first, and let's see a very short video. And let me try first. Let me change the Can you hear? No, let me another microphone. Is this okay? No. Still count? Oh, sorry. Can you can you hear? I think it goes way beyond that. I think that we should rethink how people get their information. So
finance should be for the people. People are what matters. Corporations don't matter. I think there's been a long trend in U.S. and international history for more accessible people.
You still can't hear?
Trend that we ought to reaffirm now in response to the
If no, I will just give up.
Yes, we can hear, but the voice is low.
Okay.
And a little bit not clear.
Financial Protection Bureau is an organization that helps protect individuals.
It's,
Well, finance should be for the people. People are what matters. Corporations don't matter. I think there's been a long trend in U.S. and international history toward making finance more accessible to the people. And I think that that's a trend that we ought to reaffirm now in response to the financial crisis. Make finance serve the people. Well, there's a lot of things that have to happen. One of them is already in Dodd-Frank. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is an organization that helps protect individuals against manipulative tactics from financial community. So I think it goes way beyond that. I think that we should rethink how people get their information, facilitate getting information better. Think about how people manage their risk, the risks that affect individuals, their risks to their homes, to their health, and their businesses and their careers, and all these things are accountable to better financial products that serve people's needs better. I think that housing finance has really not been optimal lately, and that to a substantial extent, the financial crisis we're now in is because of inappropriate methods for managing real estate risk. I think that we have to rethink our mortgage institutions. This has not been talked about in response to the crisis, but it ought to be the fundamental thing in response to the crisis. People took these leveraged, undiversified investments in homes with their entire life savings. And that's a risky thing to do, and we've just seen the outcome of that. I think it's time to rethink the very fundamentals of mortgage institutions. I'm worried about a double dip, either in the aggregate economy or in the housing market, or both. That ultimately these things rely on people's confidence, and the confidence is kind of iffy right now. And we have emerged from the biggest bubble since the Great Depression in both housing and in stocks, and in addition, with a lot of uncertainty about financial regulation, it puts us in kind of an uncertain situation. I don't know that it will turn out badly, and I don't imagine that it will be catastrophic, but I'm worried that it won't be stellar performance in the coming year or more. Well, the immediate thing that we need to do is to get Dodd-Frank in order and done. We're having a slow response. Dodd-Frank is the act that Congress passed last summer, was a useful advance. That's the first thing to do. But I think that we then have to move on from there and go into even further reform.
okay. Let's go on. Okay, so actually I'm very scared to play video, even if this video is just 3 minutes, because last time someone said every time the professor has videos, there is no sound. So I'm very scared to do this. I'm very nervous to play any video. In any case, you can watch the video after class, of course. Again, if you can't hear it very clearly, I know it might, because it might be difficult to understand for some of you. Okay, so what are the major issues in housing finance? So we listed several aspects. First is government subsidies to landlords and households. And especially, I think globally, there are some schemes to help the first time home buyers, for example, young people, to facilitate their home ownership. And also, it's about households' own income used to provide, maintain, and improve their housing and amenities within them. And also, some private finance from mortgage lenders, for example, the bank, and financial institutions to fund house purchase and social housing development. So as I mentioned, it's not just individual home buying. It's also about the project finance, for example, the social housing project, the public rental housing projects, and also the well-stored in housing, which is used to fund housing and non-housing activities. So if you have a dwelling, you have a property, you may use it to leverage more money, right? And also it's about the government regulations of housing, which imposes limits costs, such as building regulations and rent controls. So yeah, let's go through these issues. So government subsidies to landlords and households. So but of course, in some circumstances, the landlords receive millions in housing subsidies while their properties remain in woeful conditions. They may use the subsidies for other purposes. This is also there is also some disputes on this issue, especially on whether landlords can maintain the property properly in the private rental sector. And although they may receive some government subsidies, they may not use it to do the appropriate actions for tenants. And also, households' own income, they spend their own money to provide, maintain, and improve housing. And private finance, where do they from? Where are they from? Mostly from mortgage lenders and financial institutions. So a home buyer or builder can actually obtain financing alone, either to purchase or secure against the property from a financial institution, such as a bank or credit union, either directly or indirectly. Of course, they can directly get some money from some people, or they get it indirectly from intermediaries. And the government regulation of housing is also very important. For example, the rent control. I think we've also covered this issue in last semester's course. So, for example, in New York, rent control is based on the maximum base rent system. So, a maximum allowable rent is established for each unit, and every 2 years. So the government also regulates the maximum increase that the landlord can do. Yeah, they may increase the rent up to 7.5%. And the rent control also limits the price the landlord can charge a tenant for rent, and also regulates the services the landlord must provide. So we've actually covered some very basic issues. So one question: why do we need housing finance? Why? So perhaps you can, yeah, think it's about to help people to afford housing. stimulate the housing market. No money to buy houses, right? Relocation. As I said before, it's not just buy a house. Okay. So any other answers? Allocation revision. Yes, and also, for example, we need to maintain the house, right? We need money to maintain and also improve the quality of housing. Yeah. Make protect the interests of to balance the housing market. Yes, stop housing deterioration. Yes, it is. Have implementation some policy. Oh, yes, it's actually related to other policy goals, right? Stimulate the country's economy and increase taxes. Mhm. So thank you very much. It's always so nice to have your answers, even if we have it in online mode. So it's very pity that for the undergraduate course, actually, I did the first lecture in face to face, and because it's a smaller scale class, it's only 50 students. So I think it went quite well, but because the university encouraged us to do hybrid, and then I asked the students, well, do you opt for online or hybrid? So 80% send online, so I have to give up the hybrid mode, the face-to-face mode. Okay, so we just list some purposes. Let's see it. So yes, build new dwellings, and also cover household housing costs in the form of rent or mortgage repayment. And yes, as you mentioned, that we can stop housing deterioration, and we need to for necessary maintenance and improvement to dwellings, and also we manage the housing stock to ensure it meets certain political and social objectives. Yes, such as fulfill urgent housing needs. This is very prevailing, we can see after the World War. So I think you can have more answers, but these are very important, I think. Then let's discuss the actors. The actors in private housing finance. So yes, the purchasers. We have first-time home buyers, the young people especially, right? We trading up, we refinancing, we use the house for such kind of purpose, and also we investment, right? So investment landlords, I think it's pretty common here, and in every global cities. So that's why we have some term like buy to let, right? buy to let. That means I buy this property not for living but for letting, for renting. Yeah, let it out. Okay, and I think purchasers are very important, and then real estate agents, right? So real estate agents, they act an intermediary between sellers and buyers. So because although some people, for example, some of my friends, they say they want to save some money. They don't want to give money to the real estate agent, so they actually contact the landlords directly. They through some platform. But real estate agents are still very important nowadays because they have more information. They can I think they are doing some very professional services, and they also arrange the selling, renting, and management of properties. That's why we also our housing programs. Our housing program is very popular because we are cultivating housing managers to manage the properties. These are another very important actor, and also let's see some government policy instruments. So it is very important that first it can release information regularly, and it can provide public rental housing, and also it provides price control on new apartments and regulations of the size, distribution, and provision of housing laws at subsidized interest rates. And we also have some association, professional association like Real Estate Developers Association. So I think the most important function for such associations is to require their members, so require the developers to provide accurate and adequate information sales and sales brochure. This is something like a self-regulatory regime, so it's a professional association. We also have Hong Kong. We also have the Real Estate Development Association. But can such association, the existence of such association, really promote fairness and efficiency? What's your opinion? No idea?
Well, I think it may depends on how many competitions in the market. I think if there is only very few developers, and then maybe even they have the associations, it's more likely that those developers may have the chance to make cartels, and they may cooperate with each other. And if this happens, it may even harms the competition and may even harms the justice and efficiency. So I think it depends. I think the such associations, if there's only self-governed, and they may be just to protect their own interests, to ensure that no one developer or no one competitor is just to increase his own interest and to become in a better position than other competitors. It's just to ensure that everyone does almost the same thing. They close the same information, same level of information, then they can benefit together. So I think we can now rely on wholly rely on those self regulations. Maybe if we really want fairness and efficiency, we still need some legislation and government intervention in doing so.
Thanks very much, Andrea. I think this is very insightful comments. Yes, and this is also related to the monopoly issue. If we have some very big developers, it's very hard to regulate them just by the association itself. So thanks. Yes, that's so nice. It's just like face-to-face teaching. And also when study housing finance, we also have different approaches. We have some economic approach, we have some policy approach, and political approach. I think first, yeah, for the economic approach, it is concerned with rent and subsidy levels, and it concerns the operation of the markets, and also the role of government and regulator, and or put another way, with outcomes and the regulations of outcomes. And for policy approach, I think you are more familiar with this, right? I remember last semester we had, especially in the first lecture, we talked about the policy. So the policy approach is just concerned more with the process that leads to particular outcomes. And also we were concerned the political approach, not only economic and policy approach, we need to consider other factors that and actors in the economy and society. So an example of application of political approach is to explain why Australian government had implemented policies in favor of home ownership, and which resulted in a high home ownership rates in post-World War II period. So why? And I think not just in Australia, also in the UK, although slightly different. And also why Chinese government wants to stabilize house prices. Whenever the house price is soaring, it goes too fast. Yeah. Any comments on this? I think actually we answers are below actually. So the housing systems operate within dynamic open systems. So this means that factors external to the housing system, for example, inflation, unemployment, I think especially after the World War, for example, and after some financial crisis. So the housing finance also needs to be understood from the political approach. So housing issues can't be handled by purely internal processes. The housing problems can often be solved by using non-housing solutions. And also, for example, the shortage of housing supply of Hong Kong. So I think this issue also has plenty of political issue, political discussion, and also whether the land supply is insufficient. And nowadays, the very heated discussion about the northern metropolis of Hong Kong. And so I think political approach is also very important. Then who has a say in housing finance, state or market? I think both, in my opinion, because for the state, it is very important for the state to redistribute resources and define the rules of game. And for markets, although it is not a physical entity, it is a described phenomenon of transaction. So, as we all often said, that this is the market is invisible hand. And I think both are necessary, right? But even if the market function sometimes, if for some economy, for example, is the planned economy, the market function can be very small. But for the states, I think the regulations is very important. Otherwise, there might be a market failure. So we can't neglect the serious consequences caused by the absence of state regulation. Okay, so then in markets, financial instruments are used to transfer money and credit for purpose of developing and acquiring real property. There are many financial institutions create and purchase those instruments. So now we will discuss two important concepts. One is surplus income units and the deficit income units. So the housing finance in the market, so the savings is actually transferred from surplus income units to deficit income units. So this flow of bonds is named as saving investment cycle. Okay, so some people just give a very vivid example, maybe not very good, because we have money, but some people need money. So this is the flow of the market circle. Okay. So on the left side of the figure are surplus income units with funds to lend. And on the right side are deficit income units with a need to borrow credit. So surplus and deficit income units are broken down into three categories: individuals, households, and also businesses and governments. So both surplus and deficit income units exist within each category, but some categories will be dominated by one type. For example, the federal government in the United States has once been a deficit income unit. Let's see the more detailed definition. So surplus income units, it has more cash income flow than expenditure on consumption for a period of time. And the surplus is allocated to the financial sector. Other terms for surplus units are saver, lender, investor, supplier of loanable funds, buyer of securities. And deficit units, they have more expenditures on consumption than income during a period of time. And the deficit unit must borrow in the financial sector to balance cash inflows and outflows. Other terms for deficit spending units are borrowers, demanders of loanable funds, sellers of securities. These are some definitions. Actually, I'm not familiar with them before, but for some of you, it might be a bit boring. But I think these are basic concepts. Okay, so I think we can have a short break because last time some comments said that we need some breaks during lecture, and some students also complain that the breaks in 5701 is too short. So I'm sorry for this. Let's have a 10 minutes break. Of course, if you want to discuss with me on other issues, yes, please feel free to do that. Okay, so let's go on. Next we will discuss the concept of financial intermediaries. So the definition of financial intermediaries are financial institutions that channel funds from the surplus income units to deficit income units. So they can actually provide special services under the theory of financial intermediation. So from the definition, from the textual meaning of the definition. So what financial intermediaries do you know? So can you list some financial intermediaries? And I think it connects the surplus income units to the deficit income units. Any ideas? Stock exchange. Okay. Any other forms of intermediation? I think the most simple, the simplest one should be the private bank, right? For example, I have some money, surplus income, I will deposit in the bank, and also the bank can use the money to provide loans and mortgages to other people who need money. But any other loan shop? Yes, and any other forms of financial intermediary? Bank, yes. Phone. And I think it's another form, many people, yes, insurance, right? So you pay some money to the insurance company, and the company use this money maybe to do some to give some loans or to finance some public housing projects. Yes, credit union, securities investment bank. Okay, so thank you very much. So of course, of special interest to real estate finance are the activities of the secondary mortgages with bonds raised through the sale of securities that they create. Yes, for example, a secondary mortgage market agency. Yes, thank you, funding. Yeah, was sell a security to surplus income units to a broker and use the proceeds of the sale to purchase a mortgage from a deficit income unit through a broker. And so there are different sources of financing in the private sector. It can through some direct way or some indirect way. For direct ones, for example, from individuals, yes, for example, some personal or commercial properties, and the direct form is mostly seen in some developing countries, and also we can see the contractual financing. This is a supplementary to other routes, usually from cooperatives, and also deposit banking from general commercial banks, the most general chosen route actually, and also for mortgage bank from the selling of equity, bonds, and governments usually involved. Actually, for example, the Hong Kong Mortgage Corporation. So we have some direct form of financing, contractual financing, deposit banking, and mortgage banking. So we have already mentioned the financial intermediation. So the direct financing, it is actually a primary market. It will occur when the surplus and deficit units are brought together directly, often through the broker market. And also indirect financing, it is mainly operated through the secondary market, so it can channeling the funds from surplus to deficit units through medium of a financial institution. It also refers to the concept of financial intermediation. So as we have just discussed, so we have many forms of financial intermediaries, like the commercial banks. That means institutions that accept demand deposits and issue commercial loans. And we also have some deposit insured by FDIC. And we have strict institutions like saving, loans, and the credit unions, and mutual. We have some saving banks, institutions that take in time deposits and issue mortgage and consumer loans. And we have some investment companies. So these are core investor funds for collective investment in stocks and other security. We have insurance companies. I think this is very common these days. So it collects payments with promise to provide lump sum payment in the event of some occurrence. But often such kind of payments will take place in the future. And also we have the pension funds. The pension funds for employee contributions invest to provide a consistent cash flow for retirees. Actually, especially nowadays, the institutional investment in the public sector, public housing sector, is very common, and in some Anglophone countries, and also I think in mainland China, or perhaps also Hong Kong, for some long-term rental projects, more and more such kinds of financial institutions invested in such projects. And we also have the secondary mortgage markets. So agencies in which issue mortgage-related securities in order to purchase individual mortgages. Then let's discuss the wealth and income in housing finance. So we know that housing is the store of wealth. Right? So owners of housing can use this wealth to set up a small business or lend to others to earn rent. The value of a real property can be generated from discounting the flow of future income. So when discussing the discounting function, so normally we will consider its future value. For example, its future value is actually we will consider the compound interest. So, for example, what is the future value of $100 in 10 years' time, with the compound interest at the rate of 5% per year? So this formula actually, so it calculates its future value as 163. Then we can use the future value to generate the present value. This is actually the present discount value. So what is the present value of $163 in 10 years' time with compound interest at the rate of 5% per annum? So we can easily calculate it as $100. So of course we have different cases. For example, we have finite stream of income and infinite stream of income, and present value is the value now of the future payment to be received in future, but discounted for interest rate. So now let's discuss. I think it should be very familiar to you, especially you are from mainland major cities. We have long-term rental housing, but during the pandemic, we also see the bankrupt of some long-term rental housing companies like 蛋壳 and 自如, right? So let's see this diagram. So what is rental loan? So for some long-term rental housing companies, so it has developed a rental loan. So actually the tenants, they repay their monthly mortgage repayment to the loan issue, and the banks they give the lump sum of prepaid rent to landlords. So landlords, they just benefit from the rental loan, and tenants just actually they are borrowers of the rental loan. So can you find some risks of this model? And do you know this model? Do you know the story of 蛋壳 and 自如? I think they these years have used. Oh, really? So Xiangyu, are you a tenant? So you rented an apartment from these companies, right? So you actually signed a contract with the bank. So you need to pay repay to the bank monthly, right? And then the landlord can give the lump sum of prepaid rents. But let's discuss the risks. Do you feel that living in such apartments secure or not? If the company bankrupt, then maybe you will be dislocated by the landlord.
Yeah, I think it's possible that when the company has a financial problem, and it may broke, and there is something like this have happened. And I think that the risk existed. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I think This is actually a very heated topic, especially in the theory of housing financialization. And I remember some of you asked me what is the good topic for the future PhD studies. I think some new phenomena you can pay attention. So this is of course one. So actually they use rental loans. This is a financial arrangement. So whereby tenants, they borrow money from financial institutions to finance the lump sum of upfront rents over the whole tenancy period as demanded by landlords. And then they repay the loan debt to the financial institutions by monthly repayment. So this is, I think this is connected with what we just discussed. It's the present value. Maybe it's related to its future value. The future value is its monthly rent. It can this just provide very stable income for the landlords. So the landlords can use the property to generate future income. And also, let's discuss the risk. So we have housing finance. We also have some risks. For example, the purchase power risk. So, for example, the interest rate risk. The up and down can affect the investment value. And I think especially in the West, also in Hong Kong, the very low interest rate. The context is a very low interest rate. So I think it's also encouraged people to get into the housing investment market. Otherwise, when they save money in the bank, as deposit, they just lose money because if they can't exceed the inflation, then they are just losing money. And so the second is inflation risk. So there might be some unexpected fluctuations, so it will affect investment value and also the exchange rate risk. So it must be observed for foreign countries' investments. And also we have the local risk. It's mainly about the stability, especially political issue of a country. Otherwise, there might be some unexpected risks. And also the project risk, the success or failure of project may affect the investors' benefits. So these are some risks that the housing finance project may face. So they are interest rates risk and inflation risk and exchange rate risks, country risk, and project risk. Then what are the advantages of holding housing assets? I think it is actually in our last semester we also mentioned some aspects of the advantages of home ownership, right? So it is quite similar, a bit similar, I think. So first is equity accumulation. So it encourages saving through repaying the principal of our mortgage. And it is a mixture with investment and consumption in holding housing assets. And it can also increase other consumption by second mortgage in a blooming housing market. So actually, this might be a bit uncommon in Asian countries, but it's quite common in some Western countries, maybe because of the cultural difference. So they tend to use their property as a to be leveraged for other, to get money for other purpose, for other activities. Then what are the disadvantages of holding housing assets? I think they are also related to the attributes of housing that we've discussed last year. So because housing is it's not a normal commodity, right? I remember we have a question in the test, and so housing management it involves liability and expenses, and also immobility. So this is very important because housing is immobile. So if you hold a housing assets, it will actually give you some barriers when you want to move to elsewhere, or you want to change a job in another city. And also the asset management is very rigid, and we have very high threshold at entry, especially the huge down payment, 20% or 30%, or even, for example, in Shanghai, it's 35% for first-time buyers. So this is very high threshold of entry, and indirect housing asset holding may be an alternative. For example, the real estate investment trusts and mortgage-backed security. Then we will discuss the last issue in this lecture. So how housing finance is affected by the state. From the state side, it can mainly manipulate the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. So fiscal policy is to determine the sum of public spending and taxation. So the monetary policy is to influence the money supply. Okay, let's see the fiscal policy first. We can see that in some period, the fiscal policy is expansionary. For example, it can cutting tax so that it can stimulate growth in aggregate demand, and it can also increase government spending, so it can lower the unemployment rate and issue national debt, make the economy recover soon. So the question is, what is the timing for expansionary fiscal policy? When should the state adopt expansionary fiscal policy? Any ideas? Maybe you can think for a while. When the economy is bad, yes. the market fails to perform. Lack of demand in markets during economic, yes, during economic recession, passive, depression period, inflation, and maybe you can give some example. Let me give an example first. So, do you know a recession? Yes. Unemployment increase? Yes. So, do you know the 4 trillion investment package by the Chinese central government? Soon after the global financial crisis in 2008. So this is actually it's a form of the increase in government spending. So the 4 trillion in investment. Perhaps you know this, right? 4万亿投资, the 4 trillion investment. So can you give other examples? Or do you know what does this money go in which areas? So where did they spend the money? I think the two aspects, two areas. I think it's very evident. First is the high-speed railway construction after the global financial crisis in China, the high-speed railway construction. And the second is public housing. So let's see the right column of this slide. So it can first stimulate growth in aggregate demand. Of course, cutting taxes. Yes, infrastructure. Because infrastructure, it can actually make the economy recover very soon because it has a very long industrial chain, and it can also lower the unemployment rate, right? When each city needs to build more public housing projects, and also we need to build more high-speed railways. So we need more laborers, we need more materials. So actually, it is a very effective way for the country to recover from the financial crisis, right? So if you don't have any further ideas, I will move on. I think it's very interesting. So yes, and I think the business cycle is often has some peak and peak time and also through. So it will undergo some recession areas. That's very important. That how we can go through the recession. And so I think financial crisis, and we can observe some government policies, and especially housing policies in that period. So you can get some very insightful answers, I think. But how do we know when economy is in a recession? Do you have any idea? How do we know that the economy is in a recession? Declining business investment. Yes, of course, different measurements. Yes, unemployment rate. This is very important. Decline in employment. This is a very important index to trace the plant. And also, I think you can see the I think you can see the GDP increase, right? Yes, negative interest rate. I'm not very sure whether this is a stock price fail. Yes. Pay cut, yeah, especially for each households. I think these are all very important signs to detect whether the economy is in a recession. Yeah, thank you. And yes, but for in some time, for example, we need to adopt contractionary fiscal policy. For example, we need to increase tax. So this is inhibition of growth in aggregate demand. And we also we can reduce government spending so that increase unemployment rate. And we reduce the national debt to control inflation. So actually, I think for contractionary fiscal policy, it is mainly adopted in the period of inflation, right? Then let's see the multiplier effect. So when we increase in aggregate demand, it will result in the increase in government spending actually. And okay, now let's see the last issue is monetary policy. So we also have expansionary monetary policy and contractionary monetary policy. So for expansionary monetary policy, so for example, low interest rates, we keep low interest rates, so it will stimulate growth in aggregate demand, right? So we make the access to credit easy, and we also have our quantitative easing by Federal Reserve, making the economy recover soon. So again, so what's the timing for expansionary monetary policy? I think when the government just want to recover the economy, it is very important to adopt expansionary monetary policy. Then let's see when to adopt contractionary monetary policy. So making loans difficult to be acquired and raise the reserve rate, the interest rate, right? So of course it is good to reduce inflation. So what's the timing for contractionary monetary policy, especially we can connect it with the housing market. When we need to adopt contractionary monetary policy, especially for housing, do you have any ideas? No idea? Really? Let's see this to control overheating. Yes. Excellent. So let's see this table. I just summarized some policies by the mainland housing policy. In the year 2005, 2006. So maybe, of course, you are very young, especially the urban management student. You are very young, and maybe you are a baby in 2003. Yeah, of course you are a baby, but at that time, just after the last semester, we mentioned that the mainland housing reform, right? The 1998 housing reform. So after the reform, the housing price increased substantially. So the government just wants to control the overheat of the housing market. Let's see the policy on the 16th of March of 2005. So adjusting the housing credit policy and excess reserve interest rates for commercial banks. You can see that the interest rates on personal housing property fund loans adjusted upward by 0.18%. So, and you can see that the last you can see the last row. So notice on increasing the benchmark interest on loans. So this is actually the first time for the People's Bank of China to increase the interest rate in the past 10 years. So it's comparable to the Reserve Bank concept in the West. So you can see that interest rates on loans will continuously increase by 0.27% and blah, blah, blah in March, in May, in July, in August, in September, December. You can see that it was increased so frequently in that year because that year the housing price just went up, too madly. So the central government just wants to control the overheating of the housing market. So this is something what we call that the contractionary monetary policy. So it is very important in some circumstances for the government to adopt such kind of policy to control the overheat of the economy and inflation. Of course, this is just to avoid some forms of crisis, right? So I think this is the logic of controlling housing price. For many governments, they are happy that the housing price just go up but they don't want it to go up too rapidly. They also want to control the volatility, and they hope that it can be in a way of in stable increase. Okay, they don't want to rapid increase. So when it goes up too rapidly, they may adopt some monetary policy. But monetary policy are on the housing market, is it supply side policy or demand side policy? Do you think it's more of a supply side policy or demand side policy? Supply side, I think it's more of a demand side policy, because when we increase the benchmark interest rates, the home buyers, when they want to get more money from the bank, actually they need to pay more in their later stage. So if the mortgage interest rate is okay, maybe they would like to invest in housing markets. And also here the interest, but now the interest rate is increased. I think the supply side policies are more about the government, the land supply, the direct housing supply. Okay, so I think this is what I want to go through in today's lecture. Do you have any questions or comments? I hope you are doing well in this semester. Not too busy in the beginning of this semester. All good? Or if you want to discuss with me with other issues, then yeah, the point system in Shanghai to restrict the purchasing. This is also a demand side policy. They just want to control the speculation in housing. So they regulate who are eligible to buy, who are not. So they can just reduce the potential home buyers, reduce the number of potential buyers. Okay, so do you have any other answer or other questions? If not, then we can finish today's lecture, and want to thank you for especially who answer my questions very actively in the chat box, and I really appreciate that. Okay, if you have any questions, you can contact me by email. Yes, I will respond. Okay, so bye bye. Thank you very much.